The merciless New Mexico sun beat down on the cracked earth, turning the air into shimmering waves of heat that danced above the desert floor. Dust devils swirled between the weathered buildings of Cedar Ridge, a town that clung to existence like a stubborn weed in the harsh landscape of 1868. The wind carried the scent of sage and desperation, mingling with the acrid smell of horse manure and unwashed bodies that defined frontier life. Evelyn Carter stood on the porch of her modest ranch house, her calloused hand shading her eyes as she watched a group of riders approach from the east. At 27, she was considered past her prime by the standards of polite society back east. But out here in the territories, she was simply another soul trying to survive. Her auburn hair, once carefully pinned in the fashion of a minister's wife, now hung in a practical braid down her back. The black morning dress she'd worn for 2 years had long since been replaced by a practical brown skirt and white blouse, though the wedding ring still circled her finger, a ghost of a life that ended with a gunshot on a dusty street. The riders drew closer, and Evelyn's jaw tightened as she recognized Marshal Tucker's distinctive black hat. Samuel Tucker rode at the head of the group like a conquering general, his badge catching the sunlight in brief, blinding flashes. Behind him rode his usual gang of deputized thugs, men who'd found legitimacy for their violent tendencies under the color of law. "Mrs. Carter," Tucker called out, touching the brim of his hat in a mockery of courtesy as they reined in their horses near her fence. "Fine day for justice, wouldn't you say?" Evelyn's green eyes narrowed. "Depends on whose justice you're speaking of, Marshal." Tucker's smile was as cold as a winter creek. "Why? The only justice that matters, the law of civilized folk." He shifted in his saddle, leather creaking. "We're hunting a savage who killed 2 of Henderson's cattle. Young buck, probably Apache or Comanche. You haven't seen any redskins skulking around your property, have you?" "Can't say that I have," Evelyn replied evenly, though her stomach churned at his casual use of slurs. "And even if I had, stealing cattle hardly seems a hanging offense." One of Tucker's men, a gap-toothed brute named Garrett, spat tobacco juice into the dust. "It is when a savage does it, ma'am, they need to learn their place." Tucker's eyes glinted dangerously. "Now, Mrs. Carter, I'd hate to think you're sympathizing with the enemy. Your late husband understood the importance of maintaining order. Shame he's not here to keep you properly guided." The mention of Thomas made Evelyn's hands clench into fists, but she kept her voice steady. "My husband believed in justice. Marshal, real justice. Not the kind that comes from the barrel of a gun pointed at the defenseless." "Careful with that tongue of yours," Tucker warned, his friendly facade dropping. "Wouldn't want folks to start questioning your loyalties. A woman alone out here. Well, accidents happen." Before Evelyn could respond, a shout went up from one of the riders. "Marshal over by Cooper's Creek, fresh tracks." Tucker wheeled his horse around. "Mount up, boys. Today we remind these heathens why God gave this land to Christian folk." He looked back at Evelyn. "You'd best stay inside. Mrs. Carter, things might get unpleasant." The group thundered off in a cloud of dust, leaving Evelyn standing on her porch with rage burning in her chest. She waited until they were specks on the horizon before hurrying inside to grab her father's old Henry rifle and a canteen of water. Thomas might have been the minister, but it was her father who taught her that sometimes doing right meant breaking the law. She knew Cooper's Creek well, a meandering strip of water that cut through a series of rocky outcroppings about 2 miles from her property. If someone was running from Tucker's mob, they'd need help, and soon. Evelyn saddled her mare, Buttercup, with practiced efficiency and set off at a steady pace, taking a longer route that would keep her out of sight. The sound reached her first, shouting voices echoing off the canyon walls, punctuated by the crack of gunfire. Evelyn tied Buttercup to a mesquite tree and crept forward on foot, using the rocks for cover. What she saw made her blood run cold. A young native man, perhaps 18 or 19, was cornered against the creek bank. Blood seeped from a wound in his shoulder, and his face was gray with pain and exhaustion. He held a knife in one shaking hand, a pitiful defense against the 6 armed men surrounding him. "Come on out, boy," Tucker called out, his revolver trained on the youth. "Make this easy on yourself. Quick drop from a rope is better than what Garrett here wants to do to you." Garrett laughed, an ugly sound. "Let me have 5 minutes with him first. Marshal, teach him what happens to thieves." The young man said something in his own language, defiant even in the face of death. Evelyn saw Tucker's finger tighten on the trigger and made a decision that would change everything. The crack of her rifle split the air, sending Tucker's hat flying from his head. "That's far enough," she called out, stepping into view with her weapon trained on the marshal. "Let him go." "Mrs. Carter." Tucker's face flushed red with fury. "Have you lost your mind, woman?" "Maybe," Evelyn admitted, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. "But I won't stand by and watch you murder a boy for being hungry. Those cattle he supposedly killed, I'd bet my ranch they were already dead when he found them. Drought's been killing stock all summer." "You're interfering with the law," Tucker snarled. "No," Evelyn countered. "I'm interfering with a lynching." She kept her rifle steady despite the 6 guns now pointed at her. "That boy needs a doctor and a fair trial, not your frontier justice." For a long moment, the tableau held 7 guns creating a web of potential death under the blazing sun. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't lower her weapon. Thomas used to say that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but right action in spite of it. She finally understood what he meant. "You're making a powerful enemy today, Mrs. Carter," Tucker said softly, more menacing than any shout. "Your husband's memory won't protect you from the consequences of harboring savages." "Then I guess I'll have to protect myself," Evelyn replied. "Now back away from the boy." Tucker studied her for another heartbeat, then slowly holstered his gun. "Boys, Mrs. Carter seems to have lost her way. Grief does strange things to a woman's mind." He retrieved his hat from the ground, brushing off the dust with deliberate care. "We'll be going now, but mark my words, this isn't over." The men mounted up reluctantly, Garrett muttering curses under his breath. As they rode off, Tucker called back, "You've got 1 day to come to your senses, Mrs. Carter. After that, I can't be responsible for what happens to Indian lovers in my town." Evelyn waited until they were gone before lowering her rifle, her arms suddenly shaking with delayed reaction. The wounded youth had collapsed against the creek bank, his dark eyes watching her with a mixture of suspicion and pain. "It's all right," she said softly, setting down her rifle and approaching slowly with her hands visible. "I'm not going to hurt you." She knew he might not understand her words, but she hoped her tone would convey her intent. Up close, she could see he was even younger than she'd first thought, with the lean build of someone who'd grown up running across the desert. The wound in his shoulder was ugly, but not immediately fatal if properly tended. She pulled off her neckerchief and pressed it against the bleeding. The boy flinched but didn't pull away. He said something in accented English that sounded like "why?" "Because it was right," Evelyn answered simply. "Can you ride? My place isn't far, and I have medical supplies." He nodded weakly. With considerable effort, she helped him to his feet and supported him back to where Buttercup waited. Getting him onto the horse was a struggle, but eventually she managed to climb up behind him, keeping him steady as she guided them toward home. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Evelyn knew she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. By tomorrow, the whole town would know what she'd done. They'd call her an Indian lover, a traitor to her race, a woman gone mad with grief. But as she felt the boy's weight against her, heard his labored breathing, she knew she'd make the same choice again. Thomas had always preached about good Samaritans and loving thy neighbor. He'd never said that love should stop at the color of someone's skin. The ranch house came into view. And Evelyn allowed herself one moment of bitter irony. She'd spent 2 years as the respectable widow, the woman who knew her place. Now, in the space of an afternoon, she'd become an outlaw. "Almost there," she murmured to the semi-conscious youth. "Just hold on a little longer," as she helped him down from the horse and into her house. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn towards something larger than herself. Tucker would come back of that, she had no doubt. But for now, there was a wounded boy who needed her help, and that was enough. The desert wind picked up as darkness fell, rattling the windows and sending tumbleweeds racing across the yard like restless spirits. Inside, by the light of an oil lamp, Evelyn Carter began the task of saving a life that the world told her wasn't worth saving. She didn't yet know that by morning, everything would change. She didn't know about the stranger named Jacob Hale, who was even now riding toward Cedar Ridge, carrying his own ghosts and secrets. All she knew was that sometimes, courage came in the form of simple human decency in a world gone mad with hate. And sometimes, that was revolution enough. The first pale light of dawn crept through the kitchen window as Evelyn checked the wounded youth's bandages. She'd spent the night alternating between tending his fever and watching the horizon for Tucker's return. The boy, who'd managed to tell her his name was Joseph, slept fitfully on the cot she'd set up near the stove, his bronze face beaded with sweat despite the morning chill. A sudden knock at the door made her heart leap into her throat. Tucker wouldn't knock, she reasoned, trying to calm her racing pulse. She grabbed the rifle leaning against the wall and approached the door cautiously. "Who's there?" "Name's Jacob Hale, ma'am. My horse threw a shoe about a mile back. I was hoping to trouble you for some water and maybe directions to the nearest smithy." The voice was deep, with a slight Eastern accent that stood out like a sore thumb in these parts. Evelyn peered through the curtain and saw a lone man standing on her porch, his horse visible by the gate. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of stubble. His clothes were quality but trail-worn, and he wore his gun low on his hip like a man who knew how to use it. "Smith's in town, 5 miles east." She called through the door. "There's a water trough by the barn." "Much obliged," he said, but didn't move. "Ma'am, I don't mean to pry, but I passed some riders about an hour ago. They seemed mighty interested in whether I'd seen anything unusual out this way. Thought you should know." Evelyn's grip tightened on the rifle. "What did you tell them?" "That I'd just come from the south and hadn't seen anything but jackrabbits and dust." He paused. "They mentioned something about a dangerous fugitive. You might want to be careful." Something in his tone made her suspicious. She opened the door a crack, keeping the rifle visible. "Mr. Hale, what exactly is your business out here?" He met her gaze directly, and she was struck by the weariness in his gray eyes. "Just passing through, ma'am. Heading west, maybe California. Anywhere that isn't where I've been." Before Evelyn could respond, a crash came from inside the house. Joseph had tried to stand and knocked over the water basin. His cry of pain was unmistakable. Jacob's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, then stopped. "Ma'am, I'm thinking you might have more trouble than a thrown horseshoe can account for." Evelyn made a split-second decision. "Can you keep a secret, Mr. Hale?" "Depends on the secret." "The kind that Tucker and his men would kill us both for." His weathered face showed a flash of something recognition anger at Tucker's name. "Marshal Tucker and I have already had the pleasure. He tried to shake me down for a passage tax yesterday. I declined." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. Forcefully. Despite everything, Evelyn found herself almost smiling back. "Then you'd better come in before someone sees you on my porch." She led him to the kitchen where Joseph lay trembling on the cot. Jacob took in the scene, the bandages, the fevered youth, the medicinal supplies, without comment. "Apache?" he asked quietly. "Does it matter?" Evelyn challenged. "Not to me." He knelt beside the cot, examining the wound with practiced efficiency. But this needs better doctoring than field dressing. The bullet's still in there. I know, Evelyn admitted. I cleaned it best I could, but I'm no surgeon. Lucky for you, I've had some practice. At her questioning look, he added, The war taught many of us skills we never wanted. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing a patchwork of scars on his forearms. Do you have any whiskey for cleaning? And for the boy, this is going to hurt. An hour later, with the bullet extracted and the wound properly cleaned and sutured, Joseph slept more peacefully. Evelyn found herself studying Jacob Hale as he washed the blood from his hands. There was a competence about him, a quiet efficiency that spoke of hard experience. Thank you, she said simply. He dried his hands on a cloth, movements deliberate and controlled. You know Tucker won't let this go. He's not the type to forgive defiance, especially from a woman. I know. She poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot on the stove, offering him one. But I couldn't just stand by and watch them murder a boy. Most would have. He accepted the coffee gratefully. Most do. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken understanding between them. Finally, Jacob asked, Where's your husband? No offense, ma'am, but this seems like dangerous business for a woman alone. Dead 2 years, Evelyn replied matter-of-factly. Shot down in the street over a poker game he wasn't even playing in. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong color shirt. The shooter thought he was someone else. I'm sorry. So was the shooter. He sent flowers to the funeral. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Tucker said it was an honest mistake. Case closed. Jacob's jaw tightened. The law's flexible when it wants to be. Speaking from experience. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my brother died at Andersonville, prison camp in Georgia. I spent 2 years after the war looking for the guards responsible. Found them living free in Texas, wearing badges. His hands wrapped around the coffee cup as if seeking warmth. The law protected them. Said what happened during war didn't count after. What did you do? What needed doing? His voice was flat. And I've been riding ever since. The morning sun climbed higher, sending shafts of light through the windows. In that light, Evelyn could see the deep lines around Jacob's eyes, the kind that came from squinting against too many harsh suns and harsher truths. You should go, she said finally. Before Tucker comes back, no need for you to get caught up in my troubles. He stood, but instead of heading for the door, he walked to the window and peered out. Dust cloud to the east, still a ways off, but coming this way. Evelyn's heart sank. How many riders? Hard to say, maybe a dozen. He turned back to her. You have a root cellar. Yes, but... Get the boy down there, now. I'll help you move him. Mr. Hale, this isn't your fight. He gave her a look that might have been amusement. Ma'am, it became my fight the moment I knocked on your door. Besides, he added, checking his revolver, I've been running for 3 years. Might be time to stand still for a spell. Together they carried Joseph to the root cellar, making him as comfortable as possible on a bed of old blankets. The cool darkness seemed to ease his fever, and Evelyn left water within reach before climbing back up the ladder. What now? She asked, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. Now we wait, and we hope Tucker's in a talking mood. Jacob positioned himself by the front window, though somehow I doubt it. The dust cloud grew closer, resolving into individual riders. Evelyn counted 15 men, more than Tucker's usual gang. He'd recruited help. Mrs. Carter, Jacob said quietly, I need to know, are you prepared for what might happen here? She thought of Thomas, of his gentle sermons about peace and forgiveness. She thought of Joseph, barely more than a child, hidden in her cellar like some shameful secret. She thought of all the compromises she'd made in the name of keeping peace in a world that offered none in return. Yes, she said, and meant it. The riders thundered into her yard, Tucker at their head. His face was set in hard lines, all pretense of civility gone. "Evelyn Carter," he shouted. "Come out here and face justice." She stepped onto the porch, Jacob a silent shadow behind her just inside the doorway. "Justice, Marshal, or just your version of it?" Tucker dismounted, his hand resting on his gun. "You harbored a fugitive, interfered with the law. That makes you an accomplice to cattle rustling and whatever other crimes that savage committed." "Alleged crimes," Evelyn corrected. "Last I checked, even Indians were entitled to a trial." "Not in my town." Tucker's eyes narrowed as he noticed the movement in the doorway. "Who's in there with you?" Jacob stepped out, his presence immediately changing the dynamic. Several of Tucker's men shifted nervously in their saddles. Even in his trail-worn state, there was something dangerous about Jacob Hale, something that marked him as a man not to be trifled with. "Hale." Tucker spat the name like a curse. "Should have known you'd be mixed up in this. Birds of a feather and all that." "Marshal?" Jacob acknowledged with mock courtesy. "Still collecting taxes from travelers." "You're interfering with official business." "I'm drinking coffee on a lady's porch. If that's illegal, you'll have to show me the statute." Tucker's face flushed. "Where's the Indian, missus? Carter, hand him over and we might go easy on you." "I don't know what you're talking about," Evelyn said evenly. "Search the property," Tucker barked. Several men dismounted and headed for the barn. "You have a warrant?" Jacob asked mildly. "Don't need one. Hot pursuit of a dangerous fugitive." "Funny thing about that," Jacob mused. "I've been here over an hour and haven't seen any pursuit. Just a mob looking to string up a boy. Seen plenty of those in my time. They usually end badly." Tucker's hand moved to his gun. "You threatening me?" "Hale." "Just observing." Jacob's own hand stayed relaxed at his side, but Evelyn noticed how his weight shifted slightly, ready to move. "But if you want to make it a threat, I'm amenable." The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. Tucker's men had spread out, some searching the outbuildings, others forming a loose semicircle around the porch. Evelyn felt sweat trickle down her spine despite the morning coolness. Then one of the searchers called out from the barn, "Found blood on some rags. Marshal recent." Tucker smiled coldly. "Well now, seems like you've been doing some doctoring. Mrs. Carter, want to revise your statement?" "I doctored a wounded animal," Evelyn said. "Coyote caught in a trap. Crime." "When that animal walks on two legs, it is—" He stepped closer. "Last chance. Where is he?" "Go to hell," Evelyn said quietly. Tucker's face contorted with rage. "Garrett Wilson, tear this place apart. Check every board, every—" The shot came from nowhere, kicking up dust at Tucker's feet. Everyone froze, hands hovering over weapons. "That's close enough." The voice came from the rocks above the house, young, accented, but steady. Joseph stood silhouetted against the morning sky. The hunting rifle he'd found in the cellar trained on Tucker. He swayed slightly but kept the weapon level. "Well, well," Tucker drawled. "The savage shows himself." "I am not savage," Joseph said carefully, each English word a struggle. "I am Running Wolf of the Mescalero Apache. I took nothing. The cattle were dead when I found them. From sickness, I was hungry." "Apache lies," Tucker snarled. "Tucker lies." Joseph countered. "You killed my uncle last winter, said he stole horses. He was trading, had paper from Army. You tore it up, shot him anyway." Evelyn saw something flicker across Tucker's face. Not guilt, but annoyance at being reminded of an inconvenient truth. "That's in the past," Tucker said. "You're under arrest for—" "No." Joseph's voice gained strength. "I go, but not with you. Take me to Army Fort. They decide, not you." "The Army doesn't have jurisdiction." "Actually, they do." Jacob spoke up. "Indian affairs fall under federal authority. The boy's requesting military oversight. That's his right under the Treaty of Death. Shut your mouth. Hail. Tucker whirled on him. You think you're smart. Quoting law at me, I am the law here. No, Evelyn said, stepping forward. You're just a man with a badge and a grudge, and we're done being afraid of you. For a moment, she thought Tucker would draw on her. His hand actually moved before he caught himself, perhaps remembering there were witnesses, perhaps calculating odds with Joseph's rifle still trained on him. This isn't over, he said finally, his voice low and dangerous. Not by a long shot. He mounted his horse with stiff movements. Pull back, boys. We'll do this legal-like. As his men reluctantly gathered, Tucker looked down at Evelyn. 48 hours. That's how long it'll take me to get a federal marshal here. Enjoy them. They'll be your last as a free woman. The riders departed in a cloud of dust and threats, leaving behind an echoing silence. Joseph managed to make it down from the rocks before his legs gave out. Jacob caught him before he hit the ground. Brave but stupid, boy, Jacob muttered, helping him inside. Had to help, Joseph gasped. She helped me. I help her. They got him back to the cot, where he promptly passed out from the effort. Evelyn slumped in a chair, the magnitude of what had just happened hitting her. 48 hours, she said numbly. More like 24, Jacob corrected. Tucker's not going for any federal marshal. He's gathering more men, maybe hiring guns. When he comes back, it'll be to end this permanently. Then we run, take Joseph and— Where? Jacob asked gently. You think Tucker won't follow, that he won't put out bounties. You've challenged his authority publicly. He can't let that stand. Evelyn buried her face in her hands. Then what do we do? Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of hard-won experience. We prepare, we survive, and we make Tucker regret the day he decided to play God with people's lives. Outside, the desert wind began to pick up, carrying the scent of coming storm. In the distance, thunder rumbled across the mountains like war drums. The real battle hadn't even begun. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the kitchen as Evelyn carefully changed Joseph's bandages. His fever had broken during the night, and though still weak, he watched her with alert dark eyes. Jacob sat nearby, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision, the repetitive motion somehow soothing in the tense atmosphere. You don't have to stay, Evelyn said for the 10th time, not looking up from her work. This isn't your fight. Jacob didn't pause in his cleaning. Already had this conversation, ma'am. I'm not much for repeating myself. But why? She secured the fresh bandage and finally met his gaze. You don't know us. You could ride out right now, and Tucker would let you pass. He set down the rifle and leaned back in his chair. You ever see a dog that's been kicked too many times, how it flinches when anyone raises a hand, even in kindness? Evelyn nodded slowly. That was me after Andersonville, after what I did in Texas. His voice was steady, but she caught the undercurrent of old pain. Been running so long, I forgot what it felt like to stand still, to stand for something instead of just surviving. Joseph spoke up from the cot, his English careful but improving. My grandfather says, running wolf must sometimes become standing bear. Jacob's weathered face cracked into what might have been a smile. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. Was Tucker killed him too? The simple statement fell into silence. Evelyn felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest. Not the hot rage of yesterday, but something deeper, colder. How many families had Tucker destroyed in the name of his twisted law? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. All three tensed, weapons within reach. Mrs. Carter, it's Clara Morrison. I've brought supplies. Evelyn recognized the voice. The general store owner's wife, one of the few women in town who'd shown her genuine kindness after Thomas's death. Still, she approached the door cautiously. Clara stood on the porch with a laden basket, her worn face creased with worry. Behind her, a buckboard waited with what looked like half the store's inventory. "Clara, what?" "Hush now. Let me in quick before someone sees." The older woman bustled inside, then stopped short at the sight of Jacob and Joseph. "Oh, so it's true then." "Clara, I can explain." "No need." Clara set down her basket and began unpacking. "When my William came to these territories 40 years ago, it was the Jicarilla Apache who saved his life when he got lost in a blizzard, fed him, sheltered him, taught him how to survive out here." She pulled out bandages, medicine, ammunition. "He never forgot that kindness. Neither have I. Tucker will. Tucker can go hang himself." Clara's normally gentle voice turned steel. "Pardon my language, but that man's been a plague on this town since he pinned on that badge. Someone should have stood up to him long ago." She looked at Evelyn with something like pride. "Glad it was you." As Clara continued unpacking, she shared news from town. "Tucker's been recruiting hard, offering good money for guns. Word is he's planning something for tomorrow night, wants to make an example that'll be remembered." "How many?" Jacob asked. "Maybe 20, 25 men, some locals, but mostly drifters and hired guns from the mining camps." Clara's face was grave. "You need to run. Tonight." "No." Joseph struggled to sit up. "No more running. This my land too. My people's land before yours. I stand. Fight if must." "You can barely stand at all," Evelyn pointed out. "Then I sit and fight," he replied with a ghost of humor. Clara stayed another hour, helping prepare meals that would keep and organizing the medical supplies. As she prepared to leave, she pressed a small leather pouch into Evelyn's hands. "What's this?" "Every penny William and I could spare. It's not much, but—" "Clara, no, I can't." "You can and you will." The older woman's eyes were bright with unshed tears. 40 years we've been here. 40 years of watching men like Tucker take what they want, hurt who they please, all in the name of law and order. Maybe we can't fight, but we can help those who do." After Clara left, the three unlikely allies sat in the gathering dusk, sharing a simple meal of beans and cornbread. The domesticity of it struck Evelyn as almost absurd, as if they weren't waiting for a storm of lead and death to descend. "Tell me about your brother." She found herself asking Jacob. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then Matthew, 2 years older, but always seemed younger somehow, had this laugh that could fill a room. His hand stilled on his coffee cup. He was a teacher before the war, believed in the power of words to change the world. When the call came, he enlisted because he believed the Union cause was just. I enlisted to watch his back. "But you were separated." "Different units. I fought at Gettysburg, Antietam. He got captured at Chickamauga. Spent 8 months in Andersonville before—" He trailed off. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You didn't run that hellhole. You didn't shoot the guards who traded food for sport, watching men starve." His voice hardened. "And you didn't protect those guards after the war. Give them new names and badges and pretend their crimes never happened." "Is that what you found in Texas, the guards?" 3 of them, working as lawmen, just like Tucker. The irony wasn't lost on me." He met her gaze. "I did what needed doing. Been running ever since. Until now." Joseph had been listening intently. "You seek justice for brother." "I sought revenge." Jacob corrected. "Called it justice to help me sleep at night. But your grandfather was right, Running Wolf. Standing Bear. Maybe it's time I learned the difference." As night fell, they took turns keeping watch. Evelyn found herself unable to sleep, moving restlessly between windows. During Jacob's watch, she joined him on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the desert chill. "You should try to rest," he said softly. "Can't keep thinking about Thomas? What he'd say about all this?" "What kind of man was he?" She smiled sadly. The kind who believed every soul could be saved. He'd have tried to talk Tucker into redemption right up until the bullet hit. She pulled the shawl tighter. I used to think that made him weak. Now I wonder if it made him stronger than all of us. Different kind of strength, Jacob observed. The kind the world needs more of. But sometimes, he gestured to the rifle across his knees, sometimes the world needs this kind too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the clear desert sky. Evelyn found herself studying his profile in the moonlight. The strong jaw, the lines carved by weather and hardship, the eyes that had seen too much but still held a spark of something unbroken. Can I ask you something? She said. Why didn't you keep running today when you saw what you were walking into? He considered the question. First time in 3 years someone's pointed a gun at injustice instead of running from it. Made me remember who I used to be, who Matthew believed I could be. He glanced at her. Plus, you make good coffee. Despite everything? She laughed, a small sound in the vast darkness, but real. Inside, Joseph called out in his sleep. Trapped in some fevered dream, Evelyn went to him, speaking soothing words in the darkness. His hand found hers, gripping with surprising strength. My sister, he muttered. Tucker's men took her last spring. Said she went to reservation school, but she never came back, never wrote. Evelyn's heart clenched. She'd heard whispers about native girls disappearing, but the town preferred not to ask questions. We'll find out what happened, she promised, not knowing if she could keep such a vow. Too late, Joseph whispered. Always too late. When dawn broke, it revealed a landscape that seemed to hold its breath. No dust clouds on the horizon yet, but they all knew it was coming. Jacob had used the night to turn the ranch into a makeshift fortress, water barrels for cover, ammunition distributed to multiple locations, clear fields of fire from every window. You've done this before, Evelyn observed. Once or twice, though usually with more men and better positions. He showed her the basics of defense, where to shoot from, how to move between positions. When they come, they'll try to surround us. We need to make them pay for every inch. Joseph, despite his weakness, insisted on taking a position. They propped him near a window with a clear view of the approach, the rifle steady in his hands. As the sun climbed higher, Evelyn found herself in the root cellar, checking their supplies one last time. Jacob found her there, sitting on a crate with her head in her hands. Second thoughts, he asked gently. No, just Thomas and I were going to have children. Raise them here, teach them right from wrong, build something good in this hard place. She looked up at him. Instead, I'm about to turn our home into a battleground. Jacob crouched beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Sometimes we have to fight for the right to build something good. Your husband sounds like he understood that, in his own way. With words and faith, not guns. Different weapons for different wars. His hand covered hers briefly, the touch electric in its unexpectedness. But the cause is the same, making a world where Joseph's sister comes home, where Clara doesn't have to fear speaking truth, where you can choose who deserves your help without a gun to your head. She turned her hand palm up, their fingers intertwining for just a moment before propriety reasserted itself. But in that moment, something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of connection forged in crisis. They're coming, Joseph called from above, his young voice steady despite everything. They climbed from the cellar to see the dust cloud approaching, larger than before, dark with promise of violence. Tucker had indeed gathered an army. Remember, Jacob said, checking his weapons one last time. We don't have to win. We just have to make it cost too much to be worth it. Evelyn took her position, Thomas's rifle heavy in her hands. She thought of all the Sundays she'd sat in church, listening to sermons about turn the other cheek. But some evils demanded resistance, and some stands had to be taken regardless of the cost. The riders grew closer, and she could make out Tucker at their head, his black hat like a carrion bird against the pale sky. Behind him rode 24 men or more, bristling with weapons and dark intent. "Whatever happens," she said to Jacob and Joseph, "I'm glad I'm not facing it alone." Jacob's rare smile transformed his face. "Likewise, ma'am, likewise." The storm was about to break, and they would meet it standing. The riders stopped just outside rifle range, spreading out in a semicircle that blocked any escape route. Tucker rode forward alone, stopping 50 feet from the house, his badge glinting like a false promise in the harsh sun. "Last chance, Mrs. Carter," he called out. "Send out the Apache and hail, and I might let you live to see another sunrise." Evelyn's response was to chamber around, the metallic sound carrying clearly in the still air. Tucker's face darkened. "So be it." He wheeled his horse around. "Boys, remember, I want the savage alive if possible. The other two, accidents happen." The first shots shattered the morning calm, windows exploding in showers of glass. Evelyn dropped below the sill as bullets whined overhead, her heart hammering against her ribs. Across the room, Jacob returned fire with calm precision, each shot deliberately placed. "Stay low," he shouted. "Make them come to us." Joseph fired from his position, his shots less frequent but no less effective. One of Tucker's men cried out and tumbled from his saddle. The initial assault was fierce but undisciplined. Tucker's hired guns were used to intimidating miners and farmers, not facing determined resistance. After losing 2 more men to Jacob's deadly accuracy, they pulled back to regroup. In the sudden quiet, Evelyn heard her own ragged breathing. Her hands shook as she reloaded. "You did good," Jacob said, moving to check Joseph's position. "They'll be more careful now." "How many did we—" "Don't count, just focus on the next shot." Tucker's voice rang out again. "Hale, I know your reputation. 3 men dead in Texas, all lawmen. You really want to add to that tally?" "They weren't lawmen." Jacob's rare anger flashed. "They were murderers hiding behind badges, just like you." "Maybe so, but dead is dead, and the price on your head doesn't care about your reasons." Evelyn looked at Jacob in surprise. He hadn't mentioned a bounty. $5,000, he said quietly. "Dead or alive? Another reason you should have let me ride on." "Still time," she replied. "You could slip out the back, take Buttercup." His look silenced her. "We've covered this ground, ma'am." The next attack came from multiple directions, while gunfire erupted from the front. Riders circled around to the sides. Evelyn found herself running between windows, trying to cover too many angles. "The barn," Joseph called out. "Spotting movement." 3 men had made it to the outbuilding and were using it for cover to advance on the house. Jacob cursed and shifted position, but the angle was bad. "I'll go," Evelyn said. "I like hell." But she was already moving, slipping out the back door and using the woodpile for cover. The men in the barn hadn't seen her yet, focused on the main house. She steadied Thomas's rifle against the chopping block and squeezed the trigger. The kick nearly knocked her backward, but her shot found its mark. The nearest man spun and fell. His partners whirled toward her, and suddenly she was scrambling as bullets chewed splinters from the wood around her. Then Jacob was there, appearing like a ghost from the shadows of the house. His pistol barked twice, and both threats were eliminated. He grabbed her arm, pulling her back toward safety. "That was stupid," he growled. "That was necessary," she countered, adrenaline making her bold. They tumbled through the door together, Jacob shielding her body with his as more shots rang out. For a moment they lay tangled on the floor, his weight pressing her down, his breath hot against her neck. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. "You're bleeding," she whispered, seeing red spread across his shirt. "Scratch," he said, but didn't immediately move. Another volley of gunfire broke the spell. They separated, Jacob wincing as he checked his side. The bullet had indeed just grazed him, but any blood loss was concerning. Let me. Later, they're coming again. This time Tucker himself led the charge, perhaps sensing his hired guns needed backbone. They came hard and fast, using covering fire to get men close to the house. Evelyn found herself in a nightmare of smoke and noise, firing at shapes, reloading with trembling fingers. Joseph's position was overrun. She heard him cry out and saw him struggling with an attacker who'd made it through the window. Without thinking, she grabbed a kitchen knife and ran to help, driving the blade between the man's shoulder blades. He released Joseph and crumpled, his eyes showing surprise as life fled. Evelyn stared at what she'd done, the knife slack in her bloodied hand. She'd killed a man, not at distance with a rifle, but close enough to smell his sweat, to feel his last breath. "Evelyn!" Jacob's shout snapped her back. More men were climbing through windows. The defense was collapsing. They fell back to the center of the house, the three of them pressed together as enemies closed in from all sides. Joseph was barely conscious, loss of blood taking its toll. Jacob was down to his last bullets. Evelyn clutched the bloody knife, knowing it was useless against the guns surrounding them. "This is how it ends," she thought with strange clarity. "At least we stood for something." Then Tucker was there, stepping through the ruined front door with his gun drawn. His clothes were dusty, his face twisted with fury, but he'd survived the assault. "Drop your weapons," he commanded. They had no choice. Guns clattered to the floor. "You killed 8 of my men," Tucker said, his voice deadly quiet. 8 good men, dead because of your misguided sympathies." "Good men don't hunt boys for sport," Evelyn replied. Tucker backhanded her, sending her sprawling. Jacob started forward but froze as multiple guns swung toward him. "I'm done playing games," Tucker announced. He grabbed Evelyn by the hair, hauling her to her feet. "You want to act like a savage lover, then you'll die like one." He dragged her toward the door, and she knew with horrible certainty that he intended to make a spectacle of her death. In desperation, she grabbed at his shirt, her fingers catching and tearing the fabric. That's when she felt it, a familiar rage building inside her, not hot but cold as winter steel, the same feeling that had driven her to save Joseph, to stand against injustice. But now it was focused, sharp as the blade she'd driven into a man's back. "Tear my dress," she gasped, the words coming from some primal place as Tucker's hands grew rough. He paused, confused by her sudden shift from resistance to what seemed like invitation. His grip loosened slightly. That was all she needed. Her knee came up hard, doubling him over. As he gasped, she grabbed his gun from its holster and pressed it under his chin. "Nobody move," she shouted. The room froze. Tucker's men looked uncertain. Their leader was at the mercy of a woman they dismissed as weak. Jacob didn't waste the opportunity. Despite his wounds, he moved like lightning, retrieving weapons and turning them on their captors. The tables had suddenly, impossibly turned. "Now, Marshal," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Let's discuss terms." Tucker's eyes burned with hatred, but he was trapped. "You won't get away with this. I'm a federal marshal. Kill me and—" "Who said anything about killing?" She smiled coldly. "Joseph needs medical attention. You're going to ensure he gets it. Safe passage to Fort Union, where he can tell his story to authorities who might actually care about justice." "You're insane if you think—" She pressed the gun harder against his throat. "I've already killed 1 man today. Marshal, don't think I won't make it too." Something in her eyes must have convinced him. "Fine. Safe passage. Then what?" "Then Mr. Hale and I disappear. You'll never see us again. And you can tell whatever story you want about how the dangerous fugitives escaped." "My men won't." "Your men are hired guns who care about money, not you." Jacob had positioned himself to cover the room. "They'll take your silver and find another boss soon enough." Long minutes passed as negotiations continued. Eventually, a deal was struck. Joseph would be taken to Fort Union under Clara Morrison's supervision. Tucker wouldn't dare harm the respected woman. Evelyn and Jacob would have 24 hours head start before any pursuit. As Tucker's decimated force prepared to withdraw, he stopped at the ruined doorway. "This isn't over, Mrs. Carter. Someday, somewhere, we'll settle accounts." "I'll be waiting," she replied, after they were gone. After Joseph had been carefully loaded onto Clara's wagon with promises to look after him, Evelyn and Jacob stood alone in the wreckage of her home. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only exhaustion and the weight of what had transpired. "You need tending," she said, gesturing to his wounded side. "In a minute." He studied her with those gray eyes that seemed to see too much. "What you said to Tucker, tear my dress." Heat flooded her cheeks. It was just to distract him. Was it? The question hung between them. Evelyn remembered the weight of him protecting her, the electric moment on the floor, the way he'd appeared like an avenging angel when she needed him most. "Jacob," she started, then stopped. Not sure what she wanted to say, he crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands framing her face. "We could have died today. Almost did. And all I could think about was that I'd never, Never what?" Instead of answering, he kissed her. Not gently, not politely, but with all the desperate passion of 2 people who'd walked through fire together. Evelyn responded in kind, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he laughed low, the sound rumbling from deep in his chest. "You are one hell of a woman, Evelyn Carter." She touched his face, marveling at the fact they were both still alive. "What happens now?" "Now we run, together, if you'll have me. Find somewhere Tucker's reach doesn't extend." "And if such a place doesn't exist?" His fingers traced the line of her jaw, leaving trails of fire. "Then we make one, you and me and whatever comes next." She thought of Thomas, of the life she'd planned that had crumbled to dust. Then she looked at this man who'd stood beside her against impossible odds, who'd shown her strength she didn't know she possessed. "Yes," she said simply. As they prepared to leave, gathering what supplies survived the battle, Evelyn took one last look at her home. Bullet holes scarred every surface. Blood stained her floors. The life she'd known was truly dead. But in its place, something new had been born. Something forged in gunfire and sealed with blood, fierce and wild as the land itself. "I'll leave you no fabric," Jacob murmured, understanding her thoughts as he'd seemed to from the beginning. "Only fire." "Good," she replied, and meant it. The sun was setting as they rode out, 2 silhouettes against a sky painted crimson and gold. Behind them lay ashes. Ahead lay uncertainty. But they rode together, and that was enough. Dawn broke gray and cold over the abandoned mining camp where Evelyn and Jacob had taken shelter for the night. They'd ridden hard for 2 days, putting distance between themselves and Cedar Ridge, stopping only when exhaustion threatened to topple them from their saddles. The ramshackle cabin they'd found offered little comfort, but it had walls and a roof, and that was enough. Evelyn woke to find Jacob gone, his bedroll empty. Panic flared until she heard movement outside and saw him through the cracked window, scanning the horizon with the vigilance of a man who'd learned never to fully relax. "Anything?" she asked, joining him on the creaking porch. Dust to the south, but moving away. He glanced at her, noting the Winchester in her hands. "You're learning." "Had a good teacher." She studied the landscape scrub brush and red rocks stretching to purple mountains. "How long before Tucker breaks his word?" "He already has. Question is, how long before he finds us?" They'd been careful, avoiding main trails and towns. But Evelyn knew their luck wouldn't hold forever. Tucker had resources, connections, and a wounded pride that wouldn't let him rest. "We need to keep moving." Jacob said, "There's a trading post about a day's ride northwest. We can resupply, maybe hear news." As they prepared to leave, a new sound made them both freeze, horses approaching fast. Jacob pushed Evelyn behind him, his hand on his gun, but relaxed slightly when the riders came into view. Not Tucker's men, but Apache warriors, their faces painted for war. "Stay calm," Jacob murmured. "Let me talk." But one of the warriors raised his hand in greeting. "You are the ones who helped Running Wolf." Evelyn stepped forward. "Joseph is he. Safe at the fort, as promised." The warrior, older than the others with gray threading his black hair, dismounted. "I am Samuel Crowfeather, his mother's brother. We have been searching for you." "If you're planning revenge for involving him," Jacob started. "Revenge?" Samuel almost smiled. "No, white man. We come to warn and to repay debt." He explained that Tucker had indeed broken his word, unable to accept his humiliation. The marshal had put out bounties, not just on Jacob, but on Evelyn too. Worse, he'd been stirring up the territorial governor, claiming an uprising was brewing, that white women were being corrupted by savage influences. "He builds army," Samuel said grimly. "Not just hired guns now, soldiers, militia. They say you are dangerous rebels, that you must be stopped before others follow your example." "Others?" Evelyn asked. "The story spreads. Woman who stood against Tucker, who chose justice over her own kind. Some call you fool, others—" He paused. "Others wonder if standing is possible after all." Jacob cursed under his breath. "We've become symbols." "Yes, and symbols must be crushed, or they grow powerful." Samuel gestured to his companions. "We offer choice. Come with us to mountains. Our people will shelter you until danger passes. Your people have enough troubles without adding ours." Evelyn protested. "Our troubles are same troubles. Tucker kills us. You fight him. He hunts you. Enemy of enemy is friend." Samuel's weathered face showed years of similar calculations. "Besides, Running Wolf says you are family now. Family protects family." They had little choice. The trading post would be watched, and traveling alone, they were easy targets. After quick discussion, they agreed to Samuel's offer. The journey into the mountains took 3 days of hard riding through terrain that grew increasingly wild. They followed game trails and hidden paths, climbing ever higher into pine forests and alpine meadows. At night, around carefully concealed fires, Samuel shared stories of his people's struggle to survive in a world growing ever more hostile to their existence. Once, these mountains were sanctuary. He said one evening, "Now, even here we are hunted, called hostiles for living as we always have." "The world's changing," Jacob offered, though the words sounded hollow even to him. "Yes. Question is, will anything of us remain when change is done?" Evelyn found herself thinking of Joseph, wounded for the crime of hunger, of his sister, disappeared into a system that saw her as less than human, of all the casual cruelties she'd witnessed but never truly seen until forced to look. "It doesn't have to be this way," she said quietly. Samuel studied her across the fire. "You believe this?" "I have to. Otherwise, what was the point of any of it?" On the 4th day, they reached the hidden camp, a collection of wickiups nestled in a box canyon. Invisible until you were nearly upon it, women and children emerged to stare at the white strangers, curiosity mixed with wariness. An ancient woman approached, her face a map of years and wisdom. Samuel spoke to her rapidly in Apache, gesturing to Evelyn and Jacob. The woman listened, then surprised everyone by addressing Evelyn in accented English. "You are the one who saved my grandson's son. Joseph is your great-grandson. One of many, but all are precious." She reached out, touching Evelyn's face with gentle fingers. "I am Maria Two Rivers. You are welcome here." The next days passed in a strange peace. Evelyn helped the women with daily tasks, learning their ways. while Jacob joined hunting parties, earning respect with his woodland skills. It was a hard life, but not an unhappy one, and Evelyn found herself imagining what it would be like to simply disappear into these mountains forever. But the world had not forgotten them. A young warrior named Thomas Whitehawk arrived with news that shattered their mountain idyll. Tucker had convinced the territorial governor that the Apache were harboring dangerous fugitives. A combined force of soldiers and militia was being assembled. Unless Evelyn and Jacob were surrendered, the entire band would be considered hostile, subject to forced removal or worse. "We have to go," Evelyn said immediately. "We won't bring destruction on these people." "Where?" Jacob asked. "Tucker's got wanted posters from here to California by now." "Then we face him. End this once and for all." "That's suicide." "Maybe. But hiding here is murder, just not ours." Maria Two Rivers spoke up. "There is another way. Challenge law with law. You say Tucker lies about you, makes false claims. Prove this." "How?" Evelyn asked. Joseph heard Tucker speak of papers, records of girls taken, sold to houses of shame in Mexico, proof of his crimes hidden in his office. If such papers exist, they'd destroy him, Jacob finished. Turn his own weapon against him. "It's still suicide," Samuel pointed out. "Town crawls with his men." "Not suicide," Maria corrected. "Sacrifice, maybe, but with purpose." She looked at Evelyn. "You stood for my great-grandson when you could have walked away. This is same choice." Yes. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She walked to the edge of camp where Jacob stood watch, his silhouette sharp against the star-filled sky. "You don't have to come," she said. He didn't turn. "We've had this conversation before. This is different. In town, you'll be recognized immediately. That bounty." "Evelyn." He faced her then, and in the moonlight she could see the mix of exasperation and something deeper in his eyes. "I've been running for 3 years. From the law. From what I did. From who I was. You think I found you by accident, walked into your fight by chance?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe a man gets tired of running. Maybe he starts looking for a reason to stop, even if he doesn't know it." He stepped closer. "You asked why I stayed. Truth is, I stayed because for the first time since Matthew died, I saw someone fighting the right fight for the right reasons. And I wanted to remember what that felt like. And now? Now I stay because I can't imagine being anywhere else." His hand cupped her cheek. "Whatever happens in Cedar Ridge, we face it together." She leaned into his touch. "I'm frightened." "Good. Means you're not a fool." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But being frightened and being stopped are two different things. Thomas used to say courage was acting in spite of fear." "Thomas sounds like he was a wise man." "He was, but he never had to test his courage like this. Never had to choose between his principles and his life." "Sure he did. Every time he stood in that pulpit and preached equality in a town run by Tucker. That took its own kind of courage." She kissed him then, pouring all her fear and determination and growing love into the contact. When they parted, she felt steadier, more certain. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow night. Samuel knows a way to get us close without being seen." He pulled her against him, and they stood together watching the stars wheel overhead. "Evelyn, if things go bad—" "They won't. But if they do—" She placed a finger over his lips. "Then we'll have stood for something. That's more than most can say." The next day passed in preparation. Maria Two Rivers performed a blessing ceremony, painting symbols on their faces with ochre and ash. Samuel and his warriors would create a diversion, drawing Tucker's forces to the opposite side of town. It would give Evelyn and Jacob a chance, but not much of one. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, the small war party prepared to depart. Joseph appeared, still weak but determined. "I come too," he announced. "No," Evelyn said firmly. "You've done enough." "My sister's name on those papers, maybe. I have right." She saw the same determination in his young face that she felt in her own heart. Who was she to deny him? "You do what Samuel says," Jacob warned. "No heroics." Joseph smiled grimly. "Heroics are for white people. Apache just survive." As they mounted up, Maria Two Rivers caught Evelyn's stirrup. "Whatever comes, you have changed things, shown that standing is possible. This will not be forgotten." "I hope something more than memory comes from it," Evelyn replied. "Memory is how change begins. First one stands, then another, then many. This is how mountains are moved." They rode out as darkness fell, a small band against an army, carrying nothing but determination and the fragile hope that truth might triumph over power. The lights of Cedar Ridge glowed in the distance like fallen stars, and somewhere among them, Tucker waited. The final confrontation was at hand. Cedar Ridge lay quiet under a crescent moon, but it was the quiet of a coiled snake. Extra deputies patrolled the streets, and lamplight burned in windows that should have been dark. The town knew something was coming. From their position on the ridge overlooking Main Street, Evelyn watched Samuel's warriors split into two groups. The plan was simple: create chaos on the south end of town, draw Tucker's forces away from the marshal's office. In the confusion, she and Jacob would slip in, find the evidence Maria Two Rivers had spoken of, and get out. Simple plans, Jacob had reminded her, were usually the first to go wrong. "There," Jacob whispered, pointing to a building near the center of town. "Tucker's office. 2 guards out front, probably more inside." "The bank's right next door," Evelyn noted. "If we can get to the roof." Already thinking like an outlaw. Despite the tension, she heard the approval in his voice. A coyote howl split the night Samuel's signal. Moments later, gunfire erupted from the south end of town. Shouts filled the air as deputies scrambled to respond to the Apache raid. The 2 guards at Tucker's office hesitated, torn between duty and the desire to join the fight. "Now," Jacob breathed. They descended quickly, using shadows and alleys to navigate the familiar streets. Evelyn's heart hammered as they pressed against the bank's wall, waiting for a patrol to pass. Then Jacob boosted her up, and she pulled herself onto the roof with muscles made strong by ranch work. The gap between buildings was narrow. Evelyn jumped first, landing soft as a cat on the marshal's roof. Jacob followed, his weight making the boards creak alarmingly. They froze, but no alarm was raised. The skylight was latched from inside. Jacob produced a thin blade, working it between the frames with practiced ease. Another skill from his running years, Evelyn supposed. The latch clicked open. Inside, Tucker's office was a study in vanity. Wanted posters featuring his captures. A map marked with his territory. Certificates of commendation from grateful town councils. And there, a heavy safe squatting in the corner like an iron toad. "Can you open it?" Evelyn whispered. Jacob examined the lock, his face grim. "Not quickly, not quietly. Then we make noise." She grabbed a poker from the fireplace. "They'll think it's part of the attack." Before Jacob could protest, she swung with all her strength. The safe's door dented but held. She swung again and again, each blow ringing like a bell. On the 4th strike, the lock mechanism cracked. "Someone's coming," Jacob warned, gun drawn. Evelyn yanked open the safe. Inside were cash, legal documents, and there, a leather portfolio tied with string. She grabbed it just as footsteps pounded up the stairs. The door burst open. Deputy Garrett filled the frame. His gap-toothed face twisted in surprise that quickly became rage. "You!" Jacob's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him back into the hallway. But more men were coming, drawn by the gunfire. "Window!" Evelyn shouted. They crashed through in a shower of glass, landing hard in the alley below. Evelyn's ankle twisted, sending fire up her leg. but she forced herself to move. They ran, gunfire cracking behind them, splinters flying from near misses. Then Tucker's voice boomed over the chaos. "Forget the savages, it's a diversion. Find the woman and hail." The tide of pursuit shifted. Evelyn and Jacob ducked into the livery stable, disturbing horses that whinnied and stamped. In the hayloft, they crouched behind bales, catching their breath. "Let me see," Jacob said, gesturing to the portfolio. By matchlight, they examined the contents. What they found exceeded their worst expectations. Lists of names, young Apache and Mexican girls relocated for their education. But the destinations weren't schools. They were brothels in Juarez, mining camps in Colorado, places where young women disappeared and were never seen again. "Dear God," Evelyn breathed. "There must be 30 names here," including Joseph's sister, Maria Silvermoon, age 16, sold to Casa de Flores, Juarez. Jacob's face was stone. "Tucker's been running a trafficking ring, using his badge as cover." "This is enough to hang him," Evelyn said. "We just need to get it to the right authorities. First, we need to get out alive." The stable doors crashed open. "We know you're in here," Tucker himself, voice loud with authority and rage. "Throw down your weapons and come out." Evelyn looked at Jacob. They were trapped, outnumbered, and nearly out of ammunition. But they had the evidence. Tucker couldn't let them leave alive. "Marshall Tucker," she called out. "We have your records, every girl you sold, every crime you covered up. Let us go, or copies go to the territorial governor, the newspapers, everyone." "You're lying." Maria Silvermoon. Sold May 15th, Rebecca Crowfeather. Sold June 2nd. Should I continue? Silence. "Then, what do you want?" "Safe passage, a head start, and your word you'll leave the Apache band alone." "You think my word means anything to you?" "No, but your reputation means everything to you. These documents get out. You won't just lose your badge, you'll hang." Long moments passed. Evelyn could hear whispered arguments below. Some of Tucker's men were having second thoughts. Trafficking young women was different from hunting fugitives. Finally, Tucker spoke. "1 hour, that's all you get." "Not enough," Jacob countered. "Dawn. We get until dawn." "Fine, but if I see you again..." "You won't." They climbed down warily, weapons still ready. Tucker's men parted, creating a path. The marshal himself stood rigid with barely controlled fury, his face mottled in the lamplight. As they passed, he grabbed Evelyn's arm. "This isn't over," he hissed. "Yes, it is." She met his gaze steadily. "Because if anything happens to us, these documents will surface anyway. We've made arrangements." It was a bluff, but Tucker didn't know that. He released her arm as if burned. Outside, they found Samuel and his warriors regrouping. The diversion had cost them 2 men wounded, though not seriously. Joseph waited with their horses, his young face bright with triumph when he saw the portfolio. "You found it." "We found it," Evelyn confirmed. They rode hard through the remaining darkness, not trusting Tucker's word any more than he trusted theirs. As dawn painted the eastern sky pink and gold, they stopped at a rise overlooking the desert. "What now?" Samuel asked. "Fort Union," Jacob decided. "The commander there is honest, and he has no love for Tucker. These documents will be safe with him." And then, Evelyn and Jacob exchanged glances. Where did people go when they'd burned all bridges behind them? "California, maybe," she said. "Somewhere we can start fresh." "Together?" Joseph asked with the directness of youth. "Together," Jacob confirmed, taking Evelyn's hand. Samuel nodded approval. "You have done good thing, dangerous thing, but good. Our people will remember." They parted ways there, the Apache band melting back into the mountains, while Evelyn, Jacob, and a handful of warriors, including Joseph, headed for Fort Union. The portfolio remained safely tucked in Evelyn's saddlebags. evidence of crimes that would soon see light. 3 days later, they reached the fort. Commander Harrison, a straight-backed veteran of the Mexican War, listened to their story with growing anger. The documents were damning, and he immediately dispatched riders to the territorial capital. "Tucker's finished," he assured them. "These crimes, there'll be federal marshals here within the week. Real ones." "And us?" Evelyn asked. Harrison studied them. The woman who'd defied convention, the man with a price on his head, the Apache youth who'd risked everything for justice. "Officially, I never saw you. Unofficially, there's a wagon train leaving for California tomorrow. They could use experienced guards." That night, in the fort's guest quarters, Evelyn finally allowed herself to feel the weight of all that had happened. She'd lost her home, her position in society, everything that had defined her old life. But as Jacob held her in the darkness, she realized she'd gained something far more valuable. "Regrets?" he asked softly. "No, you... only that it took so long to find you." She smiled against his chest. "We found each other. That's what matters." A knock interrupted them. Joseph entered, excitement plain on his face. "Commander Harrison sends word. Tucker tried to run. Cavalry caught him at the border. He is arrested, and the girls, they will search for them. Bring them home if possible." "Your sister, too," Evelyn promised. "We'll make sure of it." Joseph's eyes shone with tears he was too proud to shed. "You gave us hope, both of you. This is gift greater than life." After he left, Evelyn and Jacob lay quietly, listening to the fort settling for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The long trail to California, building a life from nothing, staying ahead of any lingering vengeance from Tucker's Confederates. But tonight, they had victory. Justice, however imperfect, had prevailed. The powerful had been brought low by truth and courage and the simple act of standing up. "You know," Jacob murmured, already half asleep. "For outlaws, we make pretty good lawmen." Evelyn laughed softly. "Maybe that's what real law looks like. Not badges and guns, but people doing what's right despite the cost." Philosophy from a rancher's widow. What's the world coming to? Something better, I hope. The moon set over Fort Union, and two unlikely heroes slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. In the morning, they would begin the journey to their new life. But for now, they had each other, and the knowledge that sometimes, against all odds, justice could prevail. The fire that had started with one woman's defiance had spread, and no amount of badges or bullets could extinguish it now. The wagon train stretched like a dusty serpent across the desert. 30 families bound for California's promise. Evelyn rode alongside, her divided skirt practical for the saddle, her face shaded by a wide-brimmed hat Jacob had bought her at Fort Union. She looked nothing like the minister's widow who'd stood on a porch in Cedar Ridge just weeks ago. "Riders coming," Jacob called from his position at the train's flank. His hand moved instinctively to his rifle, old habits dying hard. But it was only Joseph and 2 Apache warriors, returning from a scouting mission. The wagon train had hired them as guides through the difficult terrain ahead. Commander Harrison's recommendation smoothing over any objections from the more prejudiced travelers. "Trail clear to Agua Caliente," Joseph reported. But he hesitated, glancing at Evelyn. "What is it?" "Town ahead has new marshal. Man named Briggs. He asks questions about travelers, shows papers with faces drawn on them." Evelyn's stomach clenched. Wanted posters. Despite Tucker's arrest, his influence apparently still reached far. "We'll go around," Jacob decided. "No." Evelyn surprised herself with the firmness of her voice. "No more running, no more hiding. We did nothing wrong." "Except kill 8 men," Jacob reminded her quietly. "In self-defense, defending an innocent boy." She straightened in her saddle. "If this Briggs wants to make something of it, let him try. I'm done being afraid of men with badges." That night, they camped near a spring. The wagons circled against the darkness. Evelyn helped prepare the communal meal, finding comfort in the simple domesticity. The other women had been wary at first. A woman traveling with a man not her husband raised eyebrows, but her hard work and quiet dignity had won most of them over. "Mrs. Carter," called Abigail Morrison, no relation to Clara, though the shared name had seemed a good omen. "Might you help with the Thompson baby? He's colicky again, and you seem to have a way with him." Evelyn took the fussing infant, walking him around the camp, humming a hymn Thomas used to sing. The baby settled, and she found herself wondering what her own children might have looked like. Would they have had Thomas's gentle eyes, or perhaps Jacob's strength? Planning on starting a family, she turned to find Jacob watching her, something soft in his expression. "I'm a bit old for that, don't you think?" 27's not old, and we're starting everything else fresh." He paused. "That is, if you were thinking, if we were—" "Jacob Hale, are you trying to propose?" He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking younger. "I suppose I am, though I had planned something more romantic than a dusty camp with a colicky baby." "This is perfect," she said, meaning it. "But there's something you should know. Thomas and I tried for children. It never happened. The doctor said, well, it might not be possible for me." Jacob crossed to her, taking her free hand while she still held the now sleeping baby. "Evelyn, I spent 3 years thinking I'd never have any kind of future. Just having you beside me is miracle enough. Children or no children, you're my family now." "Yes," she said simply. "I haven't asked properly yet." "Then ask." He dropped to one knee right there in the dust, causing heads to turn throughout the camp. "Evelyn Carter, you saved my life in more ways than one. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she repeated, louder this time, not caring who heard. Cheers erupted from the watching travelers. Even some of the men who'd been suspicious of Jacob's rough edges and mysterious past couldn't help but smile at the obvious joy on both their faces. The wedding took place 3 days later in Agua Caliente. Despite the risk, the town's minister, a young man fresh from seminary, performed the ceremony in his small church. Joseph stood as Jacob's best man, while Abigail Morrison served as Evelyn's matron of honor. Marshal Briggs did indeed appear, studying them with sharp eyes, but Commander Harrison had been thorough. Official pardons had been issued for their actions in Cedar Ridge, declaring them justified in defense of life. Briggs could do nothing but scowl and mutter about federal interference. "Funny how the law works when it wants to," Jacob murmured as they signed the marriage certificate. "Evelyn Hale," she said, testing the name. "It suits me." They stayed with the wagon train for another month, until it reached the fertile valleys of Central California. There, in a town called Esperanza Hope, Joseph translated for them. They made their decision to stay. The town was small but growing, populated by a mix of Anglo settlers, Mexican families who'd been there for generations, and even a small Chinese community drawn by railroad work. It wasn't paradise. Prejudice existed here too, but it felt like a place where change was possible. They used the small savings Evelyn had managed to bring and the pay from their wagon train work to purchase a modest farm on the outskirts of town. The house wasn't much. 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but it had good bones and better possibilities. "We'll build it up," Jacob promised, surveying their domain. "Make it something fine." Joseph stayed with them while deciding his own future. His wound had healed clean, leaving only a scar and occasional stiffness. He helped with the farm work while teaching them Apache words and ways, a cultural exchange that enriched all their lives. One evening, as they sat on their new porch watching the sunset paint the California hills gold, a rider approached. They tensed. Old fears died hard. But it was only the local sheriff, Miguel Hernandez. "A Mr. and Mrs. Hale," he greeted them, touching his hat. "I've had a wire from Fort Union. They found her, Maria Silvermoon. She's alive. staying with the sisters at a mission in Juarez while she recovers. They're arranging to bring her home. Joseph made a sound that was half sob, half war cry. Evelyn pulled him into a fierce embrace while Jacob shook the sheriff's hand repeatedly. There's more, Hernandez continued. 6 other girls from that list have been located. The federal marshals are building cases against everyone involved in the trafficking ring. Your evidence, Mrs. Hale, has saved lives. After he left, they sat in stunned silence, absorbing the magnitude of what their stand had accomplished. It was worth it, Evelyn said finally. All of it was worth it for this. The fight's not over, Jacob warned gently. Tucker had associates, and there are others like him. Men who use the law as a weapon against the helpless. Then we keep fighting, Joseph said with quiet determination. Not with guns, maybe, but with truth, with standing up. Evelyn smiled at the young man who'd become like a son to them. You sound like you've been thinking about your future. I have. I want to study law, real law. Become advocate for my people, for all people who have no voice. He looked uncertain. Is this foolish dream? It's a powerful dream, Jacob assured him, and we'll help however we can. As the weeks turned to months, their small farm prospered. Evelyn started a school for local children, teaching Apache and Mexican kids alongside Anglo ones despite grumbling from some quarters. Jacob worked the land and served as an unofficial mediator in disputes, his reputation for fair dealing spreading. They received letters from Clara Morrison, keeping them informed of changes in Cedar Ridge. With Tucker gone, the town was slowly healing. Some of his deputies had fled. Others had stayed to face justice. A new marshal had been appointed, a former slave who'd fought in the Union Army and understood something about justice denied. Maybe we could go back someday, Evelyn mused after reading the latest letter. Maybe, Jacob agreed. But not yet. We've got building to do here first. 1 year after their arrival in Esperanza, Maria Silvermoon came to visit with Joseph. She was quieter than her brother, her eyes holding shadows that might never fully lift. But she smiled when she saw the school Evelyn had built. You teach anyone? She asked. Anyone who wants to learn. Then I want to learn everything. So what happened to me never happens to another girl. That night, as Evelyn and Jacob lay in their bed, listening to Joseph and Maria talking quietly in the main room, Evelyn felt a contentment she'd never known before. Do you miss it? Jacob asked. Your old life. What's to miss? A house full of ghosts, a town that would have watched me hang for showing mercy. She turned to face him. I miss Thomas sometimes. He was a good man, but this life, our life, it's what I was meant for. Even the danger, the uncertainty. Especially that. It means we're alive, truly alive, not just existing within boundaries others set for us. Jacob pulled her close. Have I told you today that I love you? Only 3 times. You're slipping. Can't have that. He kissed her deeply, still able to make her heart race after a year of marriage. I love you, Evelyn Hale, for your courage, your compassion, your terrible cooking. She swatted him playfully. My cooking's improving. Everything about you improves with time, he said, suddenly serious, like you're becoming more yourself every day. It was true, she realized. Each day in California, she discovered new facets of herself. Teacher, farmer, advocate, wife. The minister's widow was truly dead, and in her place stood a woman who feared nothing but her own capacity to make a difference. A coyote howled in the distance, and Joseph called out sleepily from the other room. Just one. No danger. They'd taught him their ways. He'd taught them his together. They'd built something Tucker and his kind could never understand. A family born not of blood, but of choice, of shared struggle and mutual respect. What are you thinking? Jacob asked. That Mary Two Rivers was right. First one stands, then another, then many. We're not alone anymore. No, he agreed. We're not. Outside, the California stars wheeled overhead, bearing witness to a new chapter in the ancient struggle between justice and power. In a small farmhouse, two people who'd found each other in violence now built something lasting in peace. The fire that had burned away their old lives had forged something stronger in its place, a love that could withstand anything, and a determination to make the world a little more just, one stand at a time. 5 years had passed since that desperate flight from Cedar Ridge. The small farmhouse had grown into a proper home, with added rooms and a wide porch where Evelyn taught her students on pleasant days. The morning sun cast long shadows across the yard where 30 children of various ages and backgrounds gathered for lessons. Mrs. Hale," young Roberto Sanchez called out. "Joseph says we're having visitors today." Joseph, now 23 and preparing for his final law examinations, smiled at the boy's excitement. He'd returned from San Francisco the night before with the news that had kept Evelyn and Jacob awake talking until dawn. "Important visitors," Joseph confirmed. "So, best behavior. Everyone." The children settled as Evelyn began the day's lesson. But she found her mind wandering to Joseph's news. Samuel Tucker had been released from federal prison. His trafficking ring conviction had been overturned on a technicality, evidence improperly handled, a witness statement incorrectly recorded. He was a free man, and according to Joseph's sources, he was heading west. "You're worried," Jacob observed later as they prepared lunch for the students. "Aren't you concerned? Maybe not worried." He gestured out the window where their students played together. Apache, Mexican, Chinese, and Anglo children who might never have spoken in another world. "Look what we've built, Evelyn. Tucker's a ghost from the past. He has no power here." "Ghosts have a way of becoming real again," she murmured. That afternoon, the promised visitors arrived. A delegation from the state capital, including the lieutenant governor himself. They'd come to see the school that had gained fame throughout California as a model of integrated education. Mrs. Hale. Lieutenant Governor Morrison, another Morrison, Evelyn noted with amusement, said warmly, "Your work here has attracted attention at the highest levels. There's talk of implementing your methods statewide." "The methods are simple, sir. Treat every child as capable of learning. The rest follows naturally." They toured the facilities, observed classes, and spoke with students. Maria Silvermoon, now assistant teacher, demonstrated a geography lesson where students learned about their various ancestral homelands, creating a living map of human movement and survival. "Remarkable," Morrison murmured. "And you say there's been no significant conflict between the different groups?" "Children aren't born with prejudice," Evelyn replied. "They learn it, or, if we're fortunate, they learn something better." As the delegation prepared to leave, Morrison pulled Evelyn aside. "There's something else. We've had word that Samuel Tucker has been making inquiries about you and your husband. He was heard saying he had unfinished business in California." "Let him come," Evelyn said with a calm she didn't entirely feel. That evening, as the sun set behind the California hills, she and Jacob sat on their porch. The school was quiet, the students gone home. Joseph and Maria were inside, preparing legal briefs for Joseph's upcoming work with a firm specializing in treaty rights. "Maybe we should leave," Jacob said suddenly. "Start fresh somewhere else. Oregon, maybe, or—" "No." Evelyn's voice was firm. "This is our home. These are our people. Tucker took enough from us already. He doesn't get to take this too." "It could mean violence. The children are exactly why we stay. What lesson do we teach if we run? That bullies always win, that justice is temporary." She took his hand. "We made our stand in Cedar Ridge. We'll make it here if we have to." 3 days later, Tucker arrived. He rode into town alone, older and grayed by his years in prison, but still radiating menace. He'd traded his marshal's badge for a businessman's suit, but his eyes held the same cold hatred. Evelyn was teaching when he appeared at the school gate. The children fell silent, sensing danger in the stranger's presence. Joseph moved protectively closer to the students while Maria ushered the youngest inside. Class dismissed early today. Evelyn said calmly, "Joseph, please see everyone home safely." "But Aunt Evelyn," one of the Apache children began. "Now, please," as the children filed out, throwing suspicious glances at Tucker. He watched with undisguised contempt. Teaching savages to read, how the mighty have fallen. "What do you want, Tucker?" "Justice." He stepped closer. "You destroyed my life, my reputation, my career. You destroyed yourself. We just shone a light on it." His face contorted. 5 years in federal prison. 5 years of planning what I'd do when I found you." His hand moved toward his coat. "I wouldn't." Jacob's voice came from behind Tucker. He stood relaxed but ready, hand near his own weapon. "This isn't Cedar Ridge. Tucker, you're not the law here." "Neither are you. Hale, just two fugitives playing house, pretending to be respectable." Tucker's laugh was ugly. "But I know the truth. Murderers, Indian lovers, degenerates." "Is that what you came here to say?" Evelyn asked. "To call names like a schoolyard bully?" "I came to offer you a choice. Leave California tonight, disappear forever, and I'll let you live. Stay, and..." He smiled coldly. "Accidents happen, schools burn, children get caught in crossfire." The threat against the children snapped something in Evelyn. She stepped forward, and Tucker actually backed up a pace. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You can threaten me. You can threaten my husband. But if you so much as look at one of these children wrong, I'll finish what we started in Cedar Ridge." Big words from someone who's already killed for what's right. Yes. She met his gaze steadily. "I'm not the frightened widow you tried to intimidate 5 years ago. And you're not a marshal anymore. You're just a bitter old man clinging to hate because it's all you have left." Sheriff Hernandez appeared then, having been alerted by Joseph. With him were several deputies and, surprisingly, many of the townsfolk parents of Evelyn's students, business owners who'd prospered from the school's reputation, neighbors who'd become friends. "Problem here?" Hernandez asked mildly. "No problem," Tucker said, but his confidence had cracked. He'd expected to find them isolated, vulnerable. Instead, he faced a community. "Just visiting old acquaintances." "Visit's over," the sheriff stated. "Mr. Tucker, you're not wanted in Esperanza. I suggest you move along." "This isn't finished," Tucker told Evelyn. "Yes, it is." She gestured to the crowd gathering behind the sheriff. "You see those people Apache, Mexican, Chinese, Anglo, all standing together? That's what we built here. That's what defeats men like you, not guns or badges, but people choosing to be better than their fears." Tucker looked around, perhaps truly seeing for the first time what he faced. Not just two people he could intimidate, but an entire community united by something stronger than his hatred. "You'll slip up," he said desperately. "Your kind always does. And when you do, when we do, we'll face the consequences." Jacob interrupted. "Like honest people do, but you'll still be alone, eaten alive by your own poison." Tucker mounted his horse, his movement stiff with suppressed rage, as he rode away. Evelyn heard him mutter something about not natural and divine justice, but the words lacked power. He was diminished, made small by the very unity he despised. "Think he'll be back?" Maria asked. "No," Joseph said with lawyer's certainty. "He's got no legal standing, no authority, no allies. He's finished." That night, the community held an impromptu celebration at the school. Tables appeared laden with food from various traditions: tamales, stir-fried vegetables, fry bread, apple pie. Children who'd been sent home early returned with their families. turning fear into festival. "You know what this reminds me of?" Jacob said, spinning Evelyn in an impromptu dance. "What?" "That first night in your root cellar, when we thought we might die come morning, but we chose to stand anyway." He pulled her close. "Except now we're not alone." "We never were," Evelyn realized. "Even then, we had Joseph and Clara and Samuel's warriors. We just couldn't see it yet." As the evening wound down, old Samuel Crowfeather approached. He'd settled near Esperanza 2 years ago, serving as cultural liaison between the Apache community and the town. "The young ones want to know," he said. "Will you tell them the story of how the school began?" So Evelyn told it, with Jacob adding details and Joseph translating for those who needed it. She told of a dusty street in Cedar Ridge, of choosing mercy over safety, of finding courage in unexpected places. The children listened with wide eyes, some hearing it for the first time, others nodding along to a familiar tale that never grew old. "Was it worth it?" young Roberto asked. "Losing your home?" Evelyn looked around, at her husband, at Joseph and Maria who'd become family, at the students who were building a better future, at the community that had embraced them. "We didn't lose a home," she said. "We found one." Later, as they prepared for bed in the house that had grown room by room like their life together, Jacob asked, "Do you think Tucker will really stay away?" "Does it matter? We faced him down once with 3 people. Now we have hundreds." She smiled. "Mary Two Rivers was a prophet. First one stands, then another, then many. And the mountain moves." Jacob finished. They stood at their window, looking out at the lights of Esperanza spread below. Somewhere out there, Samuel Tucker nursed his hatred in solitude. But here, in this place they'd helped build, children of all backgrounds would wake tomorrow ready to learn together, to grow together, to prove that the world could be different than what men like Tucker insisted it must be. "You know what I realized today?" Evelyn said. "When Tucker threatened the children, I wasn't afraid. I was angry. Righteously, powerfully angry. The kind of anger that changes things." "Thomas would be proud." "I think he would. He always said the meek would inherit the earth, but I don't think he meant meek as weak. I think he meant those humble enough to see others as equals, strong enough to lift others up." "Philosophy teacher now, too," Jacob teased. "Just a woman who's learned that sometimes the greatest courage is simply refusing to let hate win." They made love then with the passion of 2 people who'd walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. Outside, coyotes sang to the moon, and the desert wind carried the scent of sage and possibilities. In the morning, there would be lessons to teach, crops to tend, a future to build. Tucker would fade into history, a footnote in a larger story of progress. But tonight, in a house built by love and determination, 2 unlikely heroes held each other close and knew that every choice, every stand, every scar had been worth it. The West was still wild, still dangerous, but in places like Esperanza, a new kind of frontier was being settled, one measured not in miles conquered but in prejudices overcome, not in enemies defeated but in communities united. And in a small school where children of all colors learned side by side, the future was being written one lesson at a time. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're enjoying these tales of the Wild West. Please share in the comments below where you're listening from so we can connect and share our thoughts together. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night. Hit that like button, and don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover these narratives of courage, love, and justice in the American frontier. Your support means everything.